Okay, I'm going to give you feedback on your PowerPoint. In your PowerPoint, the challenge is going to be not to have any death by PowerPoint. You can also think about the multimedia learning principles, like in terms of certain multimedia principles like temporal contiguity and spatial contiguity and things like that, and pre-teaching principle as well. Applying multimedia learning principles to this type of PowerPoint might be a little harder than regular PowerPoint presentations in social science areas. Okay, let's take a look. Opening slide is really representative of what you're going to be talking about, so I would say it's good. What is geometry? Size, it could be larger, so you could push it to a limit. Yeah, this could be probably the even better size. And the definition or the answer. If there are some key concepts in there, you could of course use a signaling principle. Like for example, you're going to be talking about the shapes in this lesson, so you could probably do something like this. It all depends what you are going to show, what you're going to teach here. It all depends on what's important here. If the shapes, sizes, patterns, and positions are the key concepts here, if you want to emphasize these, you could definitely use a signaling principle like this. So it's a good application of graphic design principles as well. Use of color is one of the graphic design principles, right? So you're going to be talking about the angles, different angles. Again, if you want to emphasize this, you could do the same thing with this again. It doesn't have to be this style, but it's an example that you could sort of distinguish the key term or key word from the rest by using different style and colors. You can even use a different size, and less than 90 degrees, that corresponds to acute. So you could do the same thing with this. This is just an idea, so you don't necessarily have to do that. Then placing the image right next to the text is an important thing, but at the same time, size matters, so I want to make it larger. By doing so, you could actually integrate it into the image like this, or you can put it right here still, and somehow indicate that this is the angle. And you can use a shape like this to indicate that this is the angle you're talking about. And of course, you can move this into right here. And I personally think this is actually a better implementation of a spatial contiguity. So you can apply the same concept, same idea to this. And so this is the main thing. Graphic representation is pretty important in this lesson, in these PowerPoint slides. So if you apply the same strategy, you can do something like this, or you can put this in right here. And same thing here. You can apply the same concept, so you could do something like this. You can place it in here too if you want to. For fourth graders, these terms are not too difficult, but let's make it larger to create a bigger impact. Today you need to consider diverse learners, and the majority of diverse learners today, when we talk about diverse learners, we mostly talk about people from different countries, like immigrants and refugees, and in many cases they are ELL, English language learners. So there's a good point in making that text readable, larger. So there's a good reason behind sort of incorporate language learning into your lesson. So vocabulary, let's emphasize vocabulary a little bit. I see you actually applying the technique I showed you earlier in here. So this is a key concept in here. So you use different color to distinguish it from the rest, to make it stand out. Very good technique. And as I talked about in class last time, this shape doesn't directly describe the definition here. If you have a point in here, if you add a point right in the middle, it might be easier to describe this definition, because you can actually measure the distance and you can prove that this definition is correct. Or you can change the color of the circle, and you can demonstrate this by adding dots at an equal distance from this point. So you'll be adding dots right on this line circle. So you're gonna have to have a sort of a scale or some sort of stick to demonstrate that these dots are at an equal distance from the center point here. Okay, square. So same concept. Try to incorporate the language learning into a lesson. And you can also use a scale here to make sure to demonstrate that the definition is correct. So same concept, same idea. One thing I want to make sure, same idea, but one thing I want to mention here is that the size. Okay, this could be larger for a vocabulary learning, and the definition can be larger, so it's a little easier to read from a distance. Yeah. And think about the positioning, so it'll be easier to follow all the three items or three elements in here. So the same concept, think about the positioning and the size. I would definitely go larger, and it's nice if this shape here and this shape here overlap. That's even better, so you could try that too. Okay, I did it. So this and this are in the exact same spot. Name stays there, shape stays there. What changes is boom. Okay, well, actually color changes, but the position doesn't change, and the position is more important in here in terms of where the viewer is going to pay attention to in the slide. So the students are more likely to pay attention to, or their attentions are naturally drawn to this shape and this definition, because this doesn't change, it doesn't move, it doesn't change the colors, so it just stays there. What changes the colors and the new elements here. So naturally your students' eyes are drawn to the definition and this. So that's a nice little technique you can use in terms of directing the learner's attention to certain points. Okay, so you're going to be actually saying this, so it's not that important, but why don't you make it larger? And I made it too large, I guess. It doesn't have to be this big, so 2 lines probably good enough. Okay, and these are pretty good images. Let's just focus on the graphic design principles here. These pictures are clear, very clear. They pop, and I don't see any extra elements here. The background color for each image is white or transparent, so you don't see any extra elements, so that's a really good practice. It's clean. So overall, it was a good presentation. It was a good PowerPoint, but I think I introduced a couple of interesting techniques or strategies you could use. So experiment on those techniques and discuss in your group whether my suggestion would make sense or not. And discuss in group what sorts of changes you would like to make. So I'm looking forward to seeing what sorts of enhancements you can make to this PowerPoint.